Who is Queen Elizabeth?
But through the inventions of science, I can do what was not possible for any of them. I can make my solemn act of dedication with a whole empire listening. I should like to make that dedication now. It is very simple.
In 2023, the world couldn't stop searching for the enigmatic figure known as Queen Elizabeth. But who is she really? And why has her name sparked such curiosity? Surprisingly, there have been 5 famous Queen Elizabeths in the history of British monarchy. The very first recorded Queen Elizabeth was Elizabeth I of England. She reigned as Queen of England and Ireland from 1558 to 1603, while the most recent Queen Elizabeth was Elizabeth II, who reigned the dynasty from 1952 until 2022. From the earliest recorded Elizabeth to the most recent, their reigns have left unforgettable marks on the pages of history. Today, we'll unravel the tales of 2 of the most influential Queen Elizabeths, exploring the power and legacy they've woven into the fabric of the world. Elizabeth I was born at Greenwich Palace on September 7, 1533, and was named after her grandmothers Elizabeth of York and Lady Elizabeth Howard. She was the second child of Henry VIII of England. Her mother was Henry's second wife, Anne Boleyn. At birth, Elizabeth was the heir presumptive to the English throne. Her elder half-sister, Mary, had lost her position as a legitimate heir when Henry annulled his marriage to Mary's mother. She was 2 years and 8 months old when her mother was beheaded. Elizabeth was declared illegitimate and deprived of her place in the royal succession. 11 days after Anne Boleyn's execution, Henry married Jane Seymour. Queen Jane died the next year shortly after the birth of their son, Edward, who was the undisputed heir apparent to the throne. Elizabeth was given a good education. By the time her formal education ended in 1550, Elizabeth was one of the best educated women of her generation. At the end of her life, she could speak and read 6 languages including English, French, Italian, Spanish, Greek, and Latin. Henry VIII died in 1547 and Elizabeth's half-brother, Edward VI, became king at age of 9. Edward VI died on July 6, 1553, age 15. His will excluded both Mary and Elizabeth from the succession, and instead declared Lady Jane Grey, granddaughter of Henry VIII's younger sister Mary Tudor, as his heir. Jane's support quickly crumbled, and she was deposed after 9 days. On August 3, 1553, Mary rode triumphantly into London with Elizabeth at her side. The show of solidarity between the sisters did not last long. Mary, a devout Catholic, was determined to crush the Protestant faith in which Elizabeth had been educated. Mary's initial popularity faded away in 1554 when she announced plans to marry Philip of Spain, who was an active Catholic. Discontent spread rapidly through the country, and Mary looked to Elizabeth as a focus to their opposition to Mary's religious policies. Elizabeth became queen at age of 25 after the death of Mary. Although Elizabeth was welcomed as a Queen of England, the country was still in a state of anxiety over the perceived Catholic threat at home and overseas.
South, I present to you Elizabeth, your undoubted queen.
Queen of England, Ireland, and France.
Elizabeth's personal religious convictions had been much debated by scholars. Elizabeth followed the Protestant faith but also kept some Catholic symbols. She wanted a Protestant solution for problems of the nation that wouldn't upset Catholics too much. In 1559, laws were made for a Protestant church with her as the leader, but it still had some Catholic elements. She became the supreme governor of the Church of England. Instead of supreme head, officials had to promise loyalty to her of risk of losing their jobs. Laws against heresy were removed and prevent the persecution of those with different beliefs. In 1563, following Elizabeth's illness with smallpox, the succession question became a heated issue in Parliament. Members urged the Queen to marry or nominate an heir to prevent a civil war upon her death. She refused to do either. She knew that if she named an heir, her throne would be vulnerable to a coup. The years of Elizabeth's reign saw an unparalleled flourishing of literature in England. In the late 1590s marked the maturity of some of the greatest names in English literature, including William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe. During her reign, many men sought adventures abroad. Elizabeth rented a slave ship to John Hawkins and gave him weapons and equipment to keep slave trading. Sailors from England sailed to the Americas. In 1580, Drake became the first Englishman to sail around the world. The expedition of these men prepared England to join the age of discovery, international trade, and owning other parts of the world. During Elizabeth's rule, trade and diplomatic ties blossomed between England and the Barbary states. England formed a trading alliance with Morocco, exchanging armor, ammunition, timber, and metal for Moroccan sugar. She also expanded diplomatic relations to the Ottoman Empire. In 1600, Elizabeth founded a trading company known as the East India Company. Over time, the company grew to dominate half of world trade and gain significant control over territories in India during the 18th and 19th centuries. The event that became the turning point of her reign was the battle against the Spaniard Navy.
I too can command the wind, sir! I have a hurricane in me that will strip Spain bare if you dare to try me!
England and Spain had long quarreled. Elizabeth encouraged Protestants in the Spanish-held Netherlands to rebel against Spain. She also encouraged her sailors to raid Spanish ships. In 1588, King Philip II of Spain sent a large fleet of ships to invade England. English soldiers gathered under the command of the Earl of Leicester. Elizabeth inspected her troops at Tilbury in Essex on August 8 and delivered one of the most motivational speeches in history. The Spanish Navy faced setbacks and was ultimately defeated by a combination of miscalculation and misfortune. In 1589, a year after the Spanish Armada, Elizabeth sent the English Armada to Spain. However, this effort ended in disaster, with significant casualties and a loss of naval advantage. The period after the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 brought new difficulties for Elizabeth that lasted until the end of her reign. The conflicts with Spain dragged on, the tax burden grew heavier, and the economy was hit by poor harvests and the cost of war. Prices rose and the standard of living fell. During this time, repression of Catholics intensified. In her last years, mounting criticism reflected a decline in the public's affections for her. In her last few years of life, Elizabeth got severely ill due to smallpox. This disease led her to partial baldness and she had to wear wigs. Her fondness of sweets and fear of the dentist resulted in several tooth decays, affecting her speech to the extent that foreign ambassadors found it challenging to understand her. In 1602, a series of deaths among her friends plunged her into a severe depression. Elizabeth died at Richmond Palace on March 24, 1603. The Protestant King of Scotland, James VI, became King of England. Elizabeth was buried in Westminster Abbey, in a tomb shared with her half-sister Mary. Elizabeth I was the last Tudor monarch and reigned for 44 years. Her accession date was a national holiday for 200 years. As Elizabeth I's reign faded into history, a new era dawned with Queen Elizabeth II. She emerged as a symbol of continuity and stability, navigating the challenges of the 20th and 21st centuries with grace and diplomacy.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
Elizabeth II was born in London on April 21, 1925. Her father was Prince Albert, Duke of York, who later became George VI. Her mother was Elizabeth, Duchess of New York. She was named after her mother. Her nickname was Lilibet. Elizabeth's only sibling, Princess Margaret, was born in 1930. The two young princesses were taught about history, language, literature, and music at home under supervision of their mother. Elizabeth was third in line of succession to the British throne. The first in line was her uncle, the Prince of Wales. The second was her father, the Duke of York. She was not expected to become queen, as Edward was still young and likely to marry and have children of his own, who would precede Elizabeth in the line of succession. Elizabeth's grandfather died on 1936, and therefore her uncle became King Edward VIII and was king only for a short time. Afterwards, Elizabeth's father, the Duke of York, became the King George VI. Elizabeth joined the British Army in 1945. She trained as a driver and mechanic and was given the rank of honorary junior commander. In 1947, she made her first official trip outside Britain. She went with her parents to South Africa and made a speech in which she pledged to devote her whole life to the service of the British Commonwealth and Empire. Princess Elizabeth married Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, on November 20, 1947. The wedding was held in Westminster Abbey. The couple lived mostly at Clarence House in London and had 4 children: Charles, Anne, Andrew, and Edward. As George VI's health declined during 1951, Elizabeth frequently stood in for him in public events. The king died in February 1952. Elizabeth was crowned queen on June 2, 1953. When Elizabeth became queen, she was sovereign of 32 nations. She worked hard to keep peace and good communication between all of them. Her early years as queen were spent traveling to many places. In 1953, the Queen and Prince Philip began an around-the-world tour. She was the first reigning monarch to visit Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji. In October 1957, she made an official visit to the United States and spoke to the United Nations General Assembly. She also toured Canada and became the first monarch to open the nation's parliament. In February 1961, she visited India, Iran, Pakistan, and Nepal for the first time. Since then, the Queen made visits to most Commonwealth countries. She also had been to the most European countries and many countries outside Europe. Before her tour through parts of Quebec in 1964, the press reported that extremists within the Quebec separatist movement were plotting Elizabeth's assassination. She didn't care about the threats and went for the tour as planned. No assassination attempt was made, but a riot did break out when she was in Montreal. Elizabeth's calmness and courage in the face of violence was illustrious. In 1966, a large pile of mining waste collapsed and slid down a mountainside, engulfing the village of Aberfan in Wales. This disaster killed 144 people. Elizabeth decided not to visit the village in the aftermath because she thought her presence would take attention away from finding survivors. She was argued that her visit would calm the chaos. Elizabeth visited 8 days later. It is said that not going to Aberfan straight away was her biggest regret. In 1991, she became the first British monarch to speak to a joint session of the United States Congress. She's the most widely traveled head of state in history.
To build on that foundation and to do better. And if the going gets rough, I hope you can still agree with your poet Emerson, who wrote in 1847, "I feel, in regard to this aged England, with a kind of instinct, that she sees a little better on a cloudy day, and that in storm of battle and calamity, she has a secret vigor and a pulse like a cannon. You will find us."
Elizabeth II was friends with many world leaders. She was on very good diplomatic terms with Sir Robert Menzies, Mary Robinson, George W. Bush, and Nelson Mandela. Elizabeth surpassed her great-great-grandmother Queen Victoria to become the longest-lived British monarch on December 21, 2007, and the longest reigning British monarch, and the longest reigning queen and female head of state in the world on September 9, 2015. Queen Elizabeth II has had a long and impactful reign as the British monarch. One notable achievement is her dedication to public service as her role as a symbol of continuity and stability. Through her reign, the United Kingdom experienced significant social and cultural changes, including advancements in technology, improvements in healthcare, and an expansion of higher education opportunities. Queen Elizabeth has also played a key role in fostering diplomatic relationships with various countries and promoting the Commonwealth of Nations. Her commitment to charity work and philanthropy, as well as her support for various cultural and environmental initiatives, has left a positive impact on the UK. Additionally, her role as a constitutional monarch has contributed to the country's political stability and the smooth functioning of its democratic institutions. Overall, Queen Elizabeth II's reign has seen positive developments in various aspects of British life, reflecting a period of progress and adaptability for the nation. Elizabeth rarely gave interviews, and little was known of her political opinions, which she did not express explicitly to the public. Elizabeth had a deep sense of religious and civic duties. She was patron of more than 600 organizations and charities. The Charities Aid Foundation estimated that Elizabeth helped raise over $1.4 billion for her patronages during her reign.
By helping to protect the vulnerable and sparing many families the pain already felt by those who have lost loved ones. Together we are tackling this disease, and I want to reassure you that if we remain united and resolute, then we will overcome it. I hope in the years to come, everyone will be able to take pride in how they responded to this challenge.
Prince Philip died on April 9, 2021, after 73 years of marriage, making Elizabeth the first British monarch to reign as a widow since Queen Victoria. Due to the COVID-19 restrictions in place in England at the time, Elizabeth sat alone at Philip's funeral service, which evoked sympathy from people around the world. Elizabeth never planned to step down, though she took on fewer public engagements as she grew older and Prince Charles took on more of her duties. Polls in Britain in 2006 and 2007 revealed strong support for the monarchy, and in 2012, Elizabeth's approval rating hit 90%. As of 2021, she remained the third most admired woman in the world according to the annual Gallup poll. On September 6, 2022, the Queen met the new Prime Minister Liz Truss and gave her permission to start her government. This was the Queen's last official act. She died on September 8, 2022, at age 96. Charles immediately succeeded as monarch. Her death certificate recorded her of death as old age. Elizabeth's state funeral was held at Westminster Abbey. More than 1 million people lined the streets of central London, and the day was declared a holiday in several Commonwealth countries. After a committal service at St. George Chapel, Elizabeth was buried with her husband Philip in the King George VI Memorial Chapel.
Westminster Hall at 10:44.
The legacies of Queen Elizabeth I and Queen Elizabeth II stand as a powerful statements to leadership, resilience, and historical impact. From the Tudor era to the modern monarchy, these remarkable queens have left an indelible mark on history, shaping the narratives of their respective times. Their stories inspire us to appreciate the enduring strength of leadership across generations.